Today, we are diving into the EU AI Act. It's the world's first major law for artificial intelligence, and honestly, it's a really big deal. This is going to change how AI is built and used everywhere, from Silicon Valley to Singapore. So let's get right into it.
And that brings up a huge question for pretty much anyone working with AI. Are you actually ready for this? Because make no mistake, it doesn't matter if your company is based in the EU or not. This law is probably coming for you.
So let's break down exactly what this all means, who it affects, and most importantly, the steps you need to be taking right now.
First things first, are you even in scope? It's really easy to think, oh, I'm not in Europe, this doesn't apply to me. But that is a massive and potentially very costly misconception.
You see, the Act has what's called extraterritorial scope. That's just a fancy way of saying it reaches far beyond Europe's borders. So if you sell an AI product in the EU, you're in. If your AI service gets used by an EU citizen, you're in. Even if you just have clients or business partners in the EU, yep, you really need to be paying attention.
Okay, so let's assume you're in scope. Where on earth do you even start? Well, the entire regulation, the whole thing, is built on one central idea, a risk-based approach.
At its heart, the Act works on a really simple principle. Not all AI is created equal. Think of it like a scale. On one end, you've got something simple, like a spam filter. That's pretty low risk. But on the other end, you might have an AI used for hiring someone or for law enforcement. That's obviously high risk. The amount of regulation you face is directly tied to the potential harm your system could cause.
And here it is, the whole framework in a single chart. You can see the 4 tiers pretty clearly. Unacceptable risk, which is just outright banned. High risk, which is heavily regulated. Limited risk, which is all about transparency, and minimal risk, which has no new mandatory rules. Let's just quickly run through each one.
First up, unacceptable risk. These are the systems that are seen as a clear threat to our fundamental rights. We're talking about things like government-run social scoring systems. These are completely banned, and that ban has actually been in effect since February 2025.
Next is the category that most businesses really need to zero in on: high risk. This covers any AI that could have a major impact on someone's life. You know, AI used for hiring, for credit scoring, or in critical infrastructure. The compliance work here is significant, and the deadline for getting it done is August 2026.
After that, we have limited risk, and this one is all about a single word: transparency. So if you use a chatbot, or if you're creating AI-generated content like a deepfake, you just have to tell people. Users have to be clearly informed that they are interacting with an AI, not a human. Pretty simple.
And finally, there's minimal risk. This bucket covers the vast majority of AI systems out there, things like spam filters or basic recommendation engines. For these, there are no new mandatory legal rules, though best practices are, of course, still encouraged. Okay, so now you've figured out how to classify your systems. The big question is, what do you actually need to do? Well, here is your practical 3-phase action plan.
We can break this whole implementation process down into 3 clear phases. First is governance. That's your foundation, and something everyone should be doing right now. Second is getting into the weeds of compliance for your high-risk systems. And third is setting up ongoing monitoring to make sure you stay compliant.
Phase 1 is all about that foundation. And seriously, you should be on this already. You need to map and classify every AI system you use. Appoint a governance lead who is accountable, and this part is absolutely crucial. You need to conduct AI literacy training. And listen, that training isn't optional. It actually became mandatory back in February 2025.
Now, for any high-risk systems, Phase 2 is where the real heavy lifting starts. You're going to need detailed technical documentation, a super robust risk management system, and clear mechanisms for human oversight. And that means you have to be able to prove that a human can step in and override the AI at any time. Finally, these systems have to be registered in a central EU database.
Okay, so like with any huge new regulation, there are a lot of myths and just plain wrong ideas floating around. Let's take a minute to clear up a few of the most common mistakes people are making. A really big one is this idea that you're off the hook if you just use an AI tool instead of actually building it. That is just not true. If you deploy a high-risk system, you have your own set of significant obligations, including conducting your own risk assessments and making sure you have that human oversight in place. We talked about this before, but it's so important it's worth saying again. The myth that this is just an EU problem is really dangerous. Because of its extraterritorial scope, if your AI touches the EU market or affects EU citizens in any way, shape, or form, you need a compliance plan. Simple as that. And what about that mandatory training? A one-off webinar for everyone just isn't going to cut it. The regulation is pretty clear that training needs to be ongoing, it has to be tailored to different job roles, and, this is key, it has to be individually documented so you can prove you're compliant.
So what's the timeline for getting all this done? Well, the main takeaway here is that the clock is already ticking, and some of these deadlines have already blown right past us.
The ban on those prohibited AI systems and the requirement for literacy training, that kicked in back in February 2025. Then in August 2025, the obligations for general-purpose AI models, the big foundation models that power so many other tools, those come into effect. But the date to circle in bright red is August 2026. That's D-Day. That's when the full, strict rules for high-risk systems go into full enforcement.
Which really brings us to our final thought. This isn't just about a one-time compliance checklist you can finish and forget about. AI is moving faster than ever. So the real question is your governance and compliance strategy built not just for today's rules, but is it agile enough to evolve right alongside this technology? All the information in this explainer was drawn from the excellent implementation guide published by Acuity Data. So if you want to go even deeper on this stuff, we highly recommend you check out their work. Thanks for joining us.